Welcome to another episode of Roundtable Tuesday. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, mental health, healing, therapy, and I have Sabriyya, of course, with me. We're both going to be sharing actually our own personal journeys, and we have a special guest.
Hi guys, my name is Paola. I am a single mama of two little girls, and I practice yoga therapy along with Reiki healing and just spiritual mentorship.
Sabriyya?
Hi, everybody. My name is Sabriyya. I am a student and dancer living in SoCal, and I'm really excited to kind of like dig into our journeys today, especially because the way that I met Paola was super organic through my roommate, and it was like we just instantly clicked, and it was like she just propelled my journey forward. I'm really interested, Paola, in you just letting everybody know how you got started and the work that you started doing.
So it's just so interesting because it's such a journey, and I really truly feel that the journey begins when we're born. You know, we're always in this space of like awakening organically, little by little, in our own timing, and then we have this like abrupt like whoa, where you start to question everything. And for me, it actually happened in 2015. I had both of my girls back to back. So they were, very young, and I was a zombie. I was like, not sleeping, and I literally had abandoned myself completely into my marriage and into being a mother. And I remember waking up one morning, and I went into my bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I literally did not recognize who I was. I couldn't. I forgot everything. I forgot that I loved to dance, that I loved music, that I forgot what color I liked. And that was like really for me to really face. It's like I had to break, in a sense, to remember. And when that happened, I was just doing yoga to just, lose the baby weight. That's what I was doing. But so interesting about the yoga portion was that I was just doing it for tension, but being able to take that time to myself, like lay there in shavasana and cry, feel everything that I was suppressing, was what was starting to change me. And it happened in a way that it was really difficult to ignore. So that kind of like leaned me into that moment of like, what is happening? Like, who am I? Where am I at? This needs to change. And so when that happened, my entire life literally started to fall apart. Just with my friendships and my marriage. And I started to question everything. And the more that I leaned into myself, the further I felt away from those around me. And it was scary. And some of those people were even family. So I jumped and I got my certification in yoga, just my 200-hour, and I wanted more. I wanted to work with people in hospitals. And so in order for me to do that, I had to get a yoga therapy certification, which is like getting your master's in yoga. And so I'm still in school at Soul of Yoga in Encinitas. It's a great school for yoga therapy and for sound healing too. And I'll graduate at the end of the year. And so once I started leaning into that, I got into tarot, I got into Reiki, I started to dibble dabble in all these different areas of wellness and spirituality. And it just kind of, everything just unfolded. And that, how I met Sabriyya. I had a women's circle, like a full moon circle at my little studio here in Corona del Mar. And she was the only one that showed up. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then we just hit it off, and here we are.
Absolutely. So what is the difference then between yoga and yoga therapy?
So yoga therapy is more individualized. It's more intentional. So, and we all of the different layers of the human body, physical, the energy, the mental, the emotional. We call it the koshas through the yogic lens. It's like we look at the individual and we assess the posture, the armoring, what's happening in their life, what's happened in the past. It is like therapy. There is compassionate listening, where we listen to what's going on in their life, whatever they're willing to share, of course. And then we use specific postures that are yoga related, right? Like whether it's like tree or it's cat, cow, and it's to, you know, dislodge areas that are blocked in the body that are making them feel constricted. So it's all very intentional, and there's a lot of autonomy in yoga therapy, and it's also like a nice bridge that gaps that space between like Western medicine and Eastern medicine. It kind of brings it together where, you know, for people who have cancer, doing a very gentle yoga asana, that's, you know, where they're just basically laying there, they're doing like little subtle movements, like that is a nice supplement to kind of help ease the symptoms of when people go through chemo. So it's like a nice way of adding that to for somebody that's going through anything like that, or who has had surgery. So that's the difference. It's a lot more intentional, and we look at the entire body as a whole rather than like just the arm. Like in physical therapy, we look at the entire posture and how that affects why you're feeling the way that you're feeling.
Yeah. I know you mentioned the women's circle that you had, and it ended up being just us two, but it was great because, you know, you were starting your Journey to Oneself program, and then we ended up doing that project together. And doing yoga therapy, it was so intentional, and it involved the journaling, it involved you know, some of the tarot, it involved the chakras and all of that I feel like that's definitely, for me at least, what propelled a lot of my healing forward, because it was so intentional. But I'm curious to know, for both of you, like what other forms of therapy you guys have dabbled in. Alyssa, if you want to share.
It was exactly what Paula said. There was just this one day where I just felt this like sudden, unexplainable heaviness, sadness, and emptiness, and nothing was really wrong. And that's when I started seeing a therapist. We kind of went through things with my childhood and in my past up until that point. And so just having someone to open up to and have that, you know, additional knowledge and background kind of helped me identify things. She helped me identify that I had been in survival mode, you know, all the way up until I was 23, and that, you know, through that I have a codependency, and that showed me so much about my relationships and my friendships. So just through those sessions and evaluating everything that I've experienced and what those feelings are and identifying it have really helped me navigate through, you know, all of my healing and understanding of myself, and I feel has made me better just in my relationships. So I did have a short session with someone who was kind of like, I think, yoga therapy. She did focus on like, in what area of my body did I feel that tightness and that anxiousness when I would have those feelings. And surprisingly, it was really interesting to see how difficult it was for me to tune into my body and to be present and to quiet my mind and think about myself. It's so easy for me to think about everyone else. So seeing those two together showed me a lot about myself.
How about you, Paola? Any other forms of therapy?
Yeah, you know, right around the time that I had my moment, I started seeing a therapist for the first time in my life, and I still see her. I check in with her twice a month. I think it's essential, especially if you do any kind of work where you're holding space for others constantly in the therapeutic realm. Like you need someone to kind of, you know, be your soundboard and to hold space for you as well. I really, really, truly feel that everybody should go to therapy at some point or another, because it helps you open up to self-inquiry, right? Sometimes it's harder to do it alone. And then when someone's there, like, it's almost like you're having a conversation out loud, you know, with yourself, and someone's listening, and it's like, oh my goodness, that's why I do that. So you start to see all of these little sparks of like insight that you're answering yourself. Someone's there just to witness. And then that's when you're like reclaiming your power back, because, you know, a therapist's job is not to tell you what you are, what you do, or that. It's like you're answering yourself. They're witnessing you unfold all of that yourself. So yeah, absolutely. I think I will go for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that everybody should go to therapy. There is a huge stigma with therapy. Like, in the Black community, and in I know a lot of communities in general, you know, especially communities where we're really told like that we have ourselves and we have our family and we have, you know, we need to be the ones to like uplift ourselves, but sometimes, you know, you really need somebody to hold that space. I know with men too, they can be seen as being like weaker for going to therapy or any of that. I'm really lucky that I was introduced to therapy at a very young age, because when I had moved from Virginia to New York, the court had mandated that I get a therapist because of the move and because my parents were like undergoing a little like custody situation. But yeah, that was my first experience with a therapist, and thank God for the state of New York for being like, get this girl in therapy, because there will be times where like things will happen to me and I feel like I'm like my resolve is there, like I'm able to handle it. And it goes back to like having therapy at literally the age of 8. And then even my school, at one point, I threw a chair at a teacher. So my school was like, give this girl a guidance counselor. So I had a guidance counselor like all through elementary school that like I would check in with, and they really taught me a lot of tools, like even getting things like a worry stone, something like as small as that, where I could just have a stone that whenever I was feeling anxious, I could put in my pocket and kind of like, I even have one right here, and just kind of like rub it. And like, you know, she told me like I could whisper like anything that I was worried about or anxiety and stuff like that. So at a really young age, I was introduced to like little things like that. And it definitely has helped me with my anxiety. And like you're mentioning, it's helped me like hold space for my friends who don't know how to handle their anxiety. And I definitely get what you guys are saying about, you know, when that moment comes when you have to heal, like it's almost like an awakening moment. So I'm curious to know how your relationships changed when you started actively, you know, doing the healing and doing the inner work.
Yeah, drastically. I mean, literally, I got a divorce because who I was when I got married was no longer there. I completely changed. And, you know, as you do this work, your vibration changes. And because of that, people will either stay with you, grow with you, or they will not. And then you keep going, right? Or they'll meet, like, it's just, everybody has their own journey and everybody awakens and they do the work on their own time. And for me, that was the most challenging part, was that it no longer felt right. And my body told me, actually. You start to feel more contracted, more tense around somebody. Not that they're a bad person, it's just that you're just not vibing anymore. Even with friends, like I felt that a lot with some friends that I'd become close with when I first moved here after I got married. It was like, you just don't resonate. You don't connect anymore. You know, the conversations don't intrigue you, engage you, because, you know, there's a saying that you can only meet another person as deep as they've met themselves. That is so true, you know? And I think like now looking back, it's like, now I understand like discernment and like, okay, they're doing their thing. I'm here. Okay. And I don't have to go above and beyond, because I was like a very codependent person in the past. Like, are you kidding me? I was a people pleaser. I did everything I needed to do to make sure that I felt loved and safe, when really I was fearful. I was in constant fear that somebody would abandon me. And of course that comes from childhood stuff. But so, yeah, everything changed. But, you know, you realize that as you do this work for yourself, that your relationships also getting enriched. They're more authentic, you know, with those who stick with you, who really see you for who you are, rather than what they want to see you for. And yeah, like, you know, the expectation of those other people who are used to you being like the people pleaser or the giver, and that starts to change, and the dynamic changes. So, you know, it was hard at first, but it's worth it, because you're choosing your truth and your path versus abandoning yourself for somebody else's approval, which, you know, you're filling an empty void, right? So.
Yeah, especially with like what you mentioned before, Alyssa, like about codependency. Once somebody basically had told me, you know, what codependency was, and then I realized like, oh shit, like codependency is a bitch, like this is what I'm dealing with. It really changed a lot for me. And like how you're saying, Paola, like people fall off when you don't do the things that they expect you to do, especially if you're somebody who falls into the trap. I know for me, once my awakening happened, I realized that I was doing a lot of like victim blaming of myself, and then that was when I had to. You have to make a choice when you're a victim that you don't want to be a victim anymore of your circumstances. You do. Like, sorry if that's like, you know, a hard pill for anybody to swallow, but like you have to make the active choice, you know, that like you don't want to be a victim anymore. But when I realized that I didn't want to be a victim, I realized I had to stop putting myself in situations with people who victimized me. You know what I mean? Because that at least that was my pattern for me. Codependency was like a huge thing for me once I started going through this like inner work and healing that had a lot of people burn off and fall off. And now I've noticed that the people in my life really are people who are on my vibration, people who I'm like, it's so unspoken sometimes. So yeah, Alyssa, I'm curious like how realizing like, you know, the codependency, how that affected your inner work, and then how that kind of changed your relationships as well.
So growing up, my parents were separated. So starting at like 8 or 9, I was taking care of my younger brother and helping my mom. And then right after high school, I had a really toxic relationship, and I was trying to change him and make him better. So up until then, like I was doing everything for everyone else. So realizing that I was codependent in that way, I had to first kind of find my own voice and know what my values are and know the things that I want, which was really weird and hard to understand that I was like 28 and I didn't know who I was. With my boyfriend now, we're very different in a lot of ways, and he's very dominant and he knows who he is. Being with him kind of helped me, I guess, evaluate myself and see the ways that I could be better, or in the ways that I was probably being toxic, by analyzing how I responded to things, or how things made me feel and why, and seeing what are the different ways that I could respond to it or what I can learn from it, rather than just being reactive and taking everything personal, because I used to take everything personal and thought, you know, oh, I'm not being a good friend, or I'm not being a good person, or something's wrong with me. And so being able to identify that I was codependent, and that with that also came like a cognitive distortion, which where, like, for example, if my boyfriend's being really quiet, I'll just assume he's mad or something's wrong, but he could totally just be having a bad day or just be tired and be in his space. So just identifying that has really helped me pause and listen to myself and kind of evaluate the situation before I react to anything, in all of my relationships.
So what kind of inner work are you guys doing like on the daily, other than, you know, going to therapy or and talking it out with people, which is obviously important, something that we're doing right now too?
For me, I move my body daily intentionally, just to like, because everything that's happening is being stored in the tissues. And so making it a commitment to, whether it's yoga or just literally putting some music on and moving, shaking, like, you know, I chant. I chant in the shower. It's so funny because my girls like think I'm crazy. Like I'm in the shower and I'm doing my mudras and I'm chanting, I'm clearing my aura and my chakras, and they're like, Mom's crazy, you know, because wait, when you're older, you'll know, you'll be thankful.
We did the same thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was me with my mom when I was younger, because like I guess I would say I grew up a little bit more spiritual. So you know, there was always just like things around the house, like books about like chakras and crystals everywhere and things like that. So like I would just have that around me, and she would always burn incense and like explain to me what it was about. And like anytime we would clean the house, we would sage the house afterwards too, you know. And so like things like that, just to like protect our space, that we would do a lot. I know for me, one of the things I'm constantly doing is journaling. Like I'm always telling people to journal, especially because, you know, therapy may not be like as accessible to people. I personally feel like nobody's going to know me or know the answer or know what I need more than I'm going to, especially when I'm able to like tap into my higher self. You know what I mean? My higher self is always looking out for me. And if I'm writing those things down, it's like sometimes the answers like come back to you. Practicing gratitude has been, and journaling it, like writing it down and being intentional about doing it, has definitely been like, I guess, the inner work for me that has really changed a lot, because I'm just so much more appreciative of the things, and especially in a world where like it's so fear-based right now, you know, with the virus, with race riots, basically, whatever you want to call it, with the media, with the news, like there's so much fear out there, and joy isn't really something that we talk about daily, but joy has to be practiced. Joy is essential for a healthy life. How about you, Alyssa?
Pretty much what both of you said. Definitely physical movement, which is why I love the idea of yoga therapy, because I feel like so much of it is in your body. Like, yes, you can work on the mind, but sometimes there's just this feeling and it won't go away. So definitely moving every single day is very important to me. I've been working out with a trainer for a year now, and it's actually become therapeutic, where like I need that hour to myself to work out. And then also journaling and practicing gratitude. It's similar to kind of what you said, Paola. I feel like through journaling and through talking to a therapy, you're kind of just letting it all out, and somehow you just stumble upon your own answer. So definitely all three of those things for me as well. Hi all. Sorry for the abrupt ending. Me and Sabriyya decided to make this a two-part episode just because we were diving in so deeply in all of our journeys. And we actually tried something new where I had a few people watch a rough cut of this episode to kind of get feedback. So there were a few things that stood out. So one of the questions was, what is codependency? What does that look like? Codependency is a pattern that's learned in our childhood. So, for example, with me, growing up at a really young age, I had to assume the role of a parent, essentially, and take care of my brother. My role was to care for someone else, to prioritize everyone else, and that had been my life all the way throughout high school. Following that, I had a long-term toxic relationship with someone that I was trying to change and make better. So all that time, I was dependent on the relationships that I was taking care of to feel validated. It was where I received my value and how I saw my worth based on the relationships that I was maintaining. That time where I just felt this sudden emptiness or heaviness, my therapist shared that I was finally in a place where I didn't have to take care of anyone. My boyfriend, like I said, is very self-sufficient. He knows who he is. So that gave me all the space now to think about myself, which was not something I was used to. Having had that time to rediscover and evolve and recreate myself. And I feel like I'm better because of it, and I can be better to others because of it. There's a saying that all of your friendships and relationships are your mirror. And the most important one, or the one that will show you the most about yourself, is your significant other, which is why I keep mentioning my boyfriend. I just wanted to share that with you all to connect the pieces, because I know majority of you watching are some of my good friends, and having people watch and kind of share their feedback before this was posted helped me put this piece together. So thank you guys again. Peace.